All right, hey guys, it's your favorite teacher, Miss Rodriguez, reporting to you. I've missed you all so very much. You have absolutely no clue. I've been so bored out of my mind. But the good news is I will be posting some YouTubes that you can check out every single day. They'll have different things that we can talk about, things that you can read, things that you can watch, and you can discuss with your family or write about them or whatever you want to do. But it's going to keep your brains from turning into mush because let's be honest, you've probably been doing nothing. So you may be asking yourself, Miss Rodriguez, what is this going to look like? Well, I have turned my living room into a new room 203. And the best part about it is you can't dirty it. Yay! So here are some features of room 203. We have a whiteboard. Is it the best whiteboard? Probably not, but it's there. And I'm just going to have a couple of things written out for you guys that I'm going to cover. So today I'll be covering remote learning. What does that look like? I'm not sure. Spring break adventures. I'm going to tell you what I did over spring break. And lastly, we're going to revisit Emmett Till and some poetry that I found that I think you'll find very interesting. Another awesome feature of new room 203 is the prettiest puppy on the planet. Alright, so now that you've gotten to see your new room 203, I'm going to be doing these different kinds of videos that you guys can watch and participate in, completely up to you. But I'm going to start with telling you guys about my spring break because I haven't been able to tell anybody about my spring break and it's been the saddest thing ever. So, before I knew about how serious the coronavirus stuff was, I did take a trip and I did go to Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah. I washed my hands. But in Memphis, I got to tour a lot of different museums. I got to see a lot of things that I hadn't seen before. But one of the coolest things that I saw was we went to the National Civil Rights Museum, which was actually the place where Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed. So it was the motel, and they had transformed the motel into a giant museum. And in that museum, you learn all things civil rights, all things Jim Crow, all things slave trade, you name it. And it was absolutely amazing. I love learning about that stuff, and I know I love teaching that stuff to you. So I was definitely geeking out a lot. And one of the things that I learned that I didn't quite know about really beforehand, I mean, I knew of it, but I didn't really know all the information about it, is that the walkouts that led to Brown versus Board of Education was led by kids. It was led by children, and it was all mainly children who were walking out of these schools, I believe in Montgomery, I could be wrong, but in the South, and they were walking out of these schools 14 years and younger, so like y'all's age, and were protesting for better schools, better funding, and they were upset and fed up with how things had been going with segregation. And so these kids walked out and led this movement completely on their own. And I thought that that was powerful because it made me think of you guys, right? Like, you guys definitely have this power. And I know right now it can feel like maybe you don't have that power, maybe you don't have that control. But you do. You do have power. You do have control. You can change things in this world. And you can make choices that are better for not only yourself, but your world. And so that was really cool to learn and find out. But when you got to the end of this museum, obviously there's a gift shop, and I tried my very best not to buy everything in the gift shop. But I got some posters for our actual room 203, which hopefully we'll be able to hang up in the classroom when I get back, when we get back. But I also got a book, and it's called The Wreath for Emmett Till, which I thought would be kind of relevant for you guys because we did talk about Emmett Till at the beginning of the school year. I know it's been a while. It was back in October. And we learned about his story. So real quick, just to refresh your beautiful minds, Emmett Till was the 14-year-old boy who was accused of whistling at a woman in a store in the South. So he was visiting from Chicago. He went to go visit his family in the South. He goes into the store. There's a white woman who is the cashier. She accuses Emmett Till of whistling at her and like saying some things, obscenities to her. And I believe her husband and then her husband's brother find out about this, and they go out and they find Emmett Till at his uncle's house, and they take him, they kidnap him, and they beat him, and they torture him, and they do all of these things to him, and they wrap a cotton gin wire and machine around his body and dump him in the Tallahassee River. And he's not discovered for 3 days, when his body somehow does float up to the surface. And remember about this story, his body is so mutilated. His body is so swollen from getting beaten and tortured that his mom couldn't recognize his face. And they actually took a picture of what his face did look like. And she had an open casket funeral just so the entire world could see it. And if you remember, it was so moving, and it caught so many people's attention, what was so crazy and the injustice with it all, that it sparked the civil rights movement, right? Rosa Parks says later on in an interview that she was moved by what happened to Emmett Till, and that essentially is what kept her from not moving off the bus. So we learned that way back in October. It was a long time ago, but it's still relevant. I mean, all of this stuff is still relevant. It's still something that you should learn about and read about. So I found this book, and it is a poem. It's written like a poem, and I'm gonna read just a piece of it. It's just a couple of pages out of it, and it's really beautifully written, and I think it's relevant to today. So we're gonna talk about 2 different questions with this poem. All right, so you can play this over and over again and hear me read this poem if you want. But the 2 questions that we're gonna be focusing on with this poem are, look at this, whiteboards. I love whiteboards. Is number 1, how has fear been I can't even read backwards. Let me try that again. How has fear played a role in people's reactions over COVID-19? Okay. And then the second question is, what current policy or law that's in place do you feel may be morally not right? I don't know if I said that right, but hopefully you understand what I'm asking. I'll go over those questions again when I'm done reading. But essentially this poem talks about those 2 things. It kind of talks about fear, and it also kind of talks about morals and like virtues and what we should do when we think something's not right or wrong. So we're going to talk about those 2 things, but I'm going to read to you. So take a load off. You haven't heard my beautiful voice in a couple of weeks, so I know that this might be something soothing for you. So here we go. Again, this is A Wreath for Emmett Till by Marilyn Nelson. So here we go. Like the full moon, which smiled calmly on his death, like the stars which fluttered their quick silver wings, like the unbroken song creation sings while humankind tramples the grapes of wrath, like wildflowers growing beside the path, a boy was dragged along, blood spattering their white petals as he, abandoning all hope, gasped his agonizing last breath. Like a nation sending its children off to fight our faceless enemy, immortal fear, the most feared enemy of the human race, like a plague of not knowing wrong from right. Like the consciencelessness of the atmosphere, like a gouged eye watching boots kick a face, like his gouged eye watching white boots kick his face. We must bear witness to atrocity, but we are whole. We can speak what we see. People may disappear, leaving no trace, unless we stand before the populace, orators denouncing the slavery to fear. For the lynchers feared the lynchee, what he might do, being of another race, a great unknown. They feared because they saw their own inner shadows, their vicious dreams, the farthest horizons of their own thought, their jungles immune to the rule of law. We can speak now or bear unforgettable shame. So that's all I'm going to read to you. I know it's beautiful. If you need to hear it again, you can rewind and play it again. But I want us to bring us back to our 2 questions. So let me see if I can find a way. There are 2 questions here. So number 1, How has fear played into people's reactions over COVID-19? So you remember the poem is talking a lot about fear, and it's talking a lot about how that has led people to react or not react, especially when considering Jim Crow. And then secondly, what current policies or laws are in place that may not be morally right? All right, so we have talked before about how just because something is a law does not necessarily make it right, right? We talked about Jim Crow. It was a law. There were a series of laws, kind of unspoken black codes, but also laws and things that allowed people to get away with things such as Emmett Till's murder. And we've also talked about segregation and how that was a law, but people didn't say anything against it, including African Americans and white people at the time. So we've talked about these kinds of things, and I want you to do something with both of those questions. You can either talk with a family or friend about those questions, maybe bring up the poem, maybe bring up anything that we've talked about in class, or you can write about it. So you can just write your answers to either one of those questions or both of those questions. Or you can just think about those two things. You can do your own research. If you don't know about any current policies or things in place that maybe are morally incorrect, Google them, right? You've got the entire world on this little device, which is just, it's crazy. But you can Google these things and find out for yourself if there's something in this world that's going on right now that is a policy or it is a law that maybe you disagree with because you think it's not right. It doesn't do something for all of humankind. So two things to kind of think of, and two things that you could possibly bring up at dinner tonight or tomorrow night. So with all of these things being said, know that I absolutely miss and love every single one of you. I'm gonna try my best not to lose my mind, neither should you, and stay safe. Stop going over to people's houses, Snapchat them, FaceTime them, whatever, but do not leave your house if you can help it. Definitely go for like walks or things like that, but don't get in contact with people, and make sure you're washing your hands. Don't be nasty, okay? Wash your hands. It takes 20 seconds. You get the back, you get in between, you get the front, and just stay safe. I'm hoping to see you guys in a couple weeks. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoy my little videos, okay? If you have questions, comments, you can always comment, I think, down below. I think that's how YouTube works. I don't know. And definitely subscribe so that way these things pop up on your little YouTube timeline, okay? So that is what I have for you guys. Mwah! Miss ya.